Max Mossgate. On a Wednesday, when the fog from the river refused to lift, a folded note arrived under Max Mossgate's apartment door, damp as a seal's paw and smelling faintly of cut grass and ink. The note was from Lila Ashdown, city architect of South Ward, and it read in small, careful letters that the moss had returned to the subway in a way no cleaning crew could explain and no engineer would admit. Max unspooled the ribbon that secured it, and a spiral of memory opened with it. Months of history reports from transit crews, the odd puddles of green luminescence beneath the public notices in Lark Market, and the way news shoots had started to sing when the night buses passed. He knew, because he had spent years listening to the city breathe, that this was not a simple curiosity. The city heart, as the oldest hands at City Hall whispered, was stirring. The call had come at last. Max sat on the edge of his bed, telling himself that he had other cases. Lost cats and petty thievery, the sort of tidy mysteries that closed with a neat square of red tape. And that the city was not a closet he was obliged to clean. Yet the letter hummed in his pocket as if it were a moth trapped in cloth. He packed his old magnifying glass, a flask of rainwater with a cork he could pull with his teeth, a tin of breadcrumbs labelled for corridors and clues, and, after a moment's indecision, the leaf key his aunt had pressed into his palm before she vanished among the records. A dull green token with a vein that seemed to pulse if you held it in sunlight. He fetched Nettle, a city warden who had once walked a patrol with him and still saluted as if they were on parade. The elevator to the basement rumbled. The door to the city trembled as if remembering its hinges. Max took a breath and stepped toward the part of town that did not appear on any map anyone was allowed to talk about. Beneath the station's tiled floor, the city slipped sideways. The ordinary world, coffee steam, advertisements for umbrellas, the timetable that never quite matched the trains, receded like a shoreline under tide. Here, under the platform, the air smelled of stone warmed by sun and dark soil that never saw daylight. Moss stepped out of cracks as if stepping from a room, sprouting carpet steps where no architect had laid them. Max ran his fingers along a seam in the wall where brick met brick. The seam bent, acknowledging his presence. He followed a seam to a seam until he stood at the edge of the subroute, a place no construction plan had ever named, but every accident had alluded to. Nettle glanced back toward the ordinary city as if she might escape it by an act of will. Max told her it never worked that way. They descended. The subroute welcomed them with soft noises, not quite chirps, not quite whispers, and the feeling of being watched by things that had chosen patience over haste. They were alone in the subroute. A girl in a brass-buttoned coat, Maisie Finch, former newspaper runner turned stray archivist, emerged from behind a plinth of roots with a lantern that steadied itself to the rhythm of her breath. A man in a suit-smudged waistcoat, Oliver Rook, crouched beside a spill of luminous moss and muttered about exposure and rights of way, until Maisie pointed out that the moss was responding to his impatience by retracting. Tests came quickly then. The moss drew back when Nettle swore and clanged their baton, but stretched when Max spoke softly, his voice catching the way the city did in late afternoon. Maisie showed them how to read the spores not as letters but as patterns in the breath. Oliver had mapped the rise of green along the rail tunnels, and his map, inked over the official grid, was alarming because it suggested that the moss was at a colony but a map of attention. Quiet where the city was well loved, loud where it had been neglected. They found traps of sound in the walls and sat through them, listening until their ears hurt, until the traps grew bored and parted. They lost their way once, doubled back twice, and nearly gave up when Nettle's shoulder brushed a bristle of spores that sent them all staggering with laughter they could not stop. It was real, Max thought. It was playing with them, and that perhaps was what made it dangerous. The path narrowed to the size of a promise. The substrate they walked, changing from stone to something that held the memory of rain. Above them, somewhere, a train pulled into a station with its customary sigh, but down here the noise came only when Moss consented to carry it. They drew close to the heart of the subroute, to a chamber the city had never carved out of the world, and yet had always been there. The air thrummed with a presence not quite animal, not quite plant. In the centre of the chamber, a green curtain rippled, more living wall than fabric. Edda Ashdown stood with her hand pressed against the curtain, not to push it, but to be answered by it. Lever Ashdown, who had written Max the letter, stepped from the shadow of an arch and said, with a care that looked like reluctance, that the city heart would not speak to men and women who wrote it off as maintenance. The city held breath with them. Nettle shifted the grip on the baton. Oliver murmured a warning. Maisie, by instinct, hid a lantern. Max felt the wall's attention turn toward him as if he were being read by a patient creature who had learned to read a great many people and had grown weary of most of them. Edda Ashdown didn't arrive to be reasonable. She arrived to make the sub-route into a tool, and she had brought with her wardens in blue who had never been asked to question their orders. The confrontation rose like steam from a kettle left too long. The green curtain parted, and from it stepped the Green Warden, a shape of moss and intent that unfurled like a coat and spoke with a voice made of leaves brushing each other. It was not a monster, it was a city in miniature, a guardian with too many eyes to count and too much patience to waste. Edda tried to cut the Warden's narrative with the city's charter, a document full of fine words about responsibility and language about progress that had nothing to do with growing things. The Green Warden inhaled, the air shivered, the Warden stumbled as if they had walked into wind. Max understood then that the luminous moss had been trying to carry messages all along. Requests for light where there was none, invitations to care where neglect had taken root. He didn't draw his baton or his pen. He held out his hand, the leaf key glimmering faintly. The Green Warden touched it with a frond, and the memory of the old library, the one that burned before Max was born but lived in his aunt's stories, stirred. It was not one thing, it was 1,000 histories, each leaf a record of what had been and what might yet be. The knowledge was not a threat, it was an elixir, bitter at first, then sweet with the possibility of a city that knew its own stories. Edda's wardens lowered their batons as the Green Warden folded itself into the leaf key and settled, not defeated but invited. In the hush that followed, Max felt the pressure of the city's attention shift from suspicion to attention to something like forgiveness. He had not conquered anything, he had been allowed to listen. They rose from the sub-route carrying the leaf key between them, and the ordinary city took a moment to remember how to look casual. Max set the key on Leela's desk, and she touched it as if it might burn her. The action was simple, the effect enormous. Wardens would no longer fear the cracks in walls. The transit authority would detour trains around the places where the moss wanted to sing. And in every station they would place not a warning sign but a listening place, a bench with a brass plaque engraved with instructions anyone could understand. Breathe, notice, report. Maisie would walk the city with their lantern, gathering tales the way others gather coins. And Oliver would write his column about underground gardens with enough honesty to make people check under their sinks for green surprises. Nettle would go back to patrol, but she would carry with her the knowledge that the city's laws were the only ones that mattered. Max would keep investigating the city the way he always had, quietly, politely, with the patience the city had taught him by slow degrees. The Green Warden did not vanish. It lived now in the leaf key and in the stories people would tell themselves when they brushed past a seam of moss and felt the air hum in return. And as the rain that night fell not like a bother but like a blessing, the city held the memory of a day when someone had listened to a murmur beneath the floor and had been brave enough to walk toward Erneb.